Have you ever wondered how far loneliness can go before it begins to speak, before it gives itself a name, a face, a crown? We know of kings who conquered nations. We know of queens who were beheaded, of emperors who fell in blood. But there was one ruler, quiet, devout, and forgotten by time, who made the world bow to someone who never existed. They say he loved her deeply, more than any real woman, more than any god. But she had no breath, no bones, no past. She had no childhood, no lineage, no record of birth, not even a whisper in the village census. And yet, she was crowned Empress. Her name embroidered on silk, her initials pressed into royal wax. Amelthea. The name the emperor repeated over and over as if afraid it might disappear if left unspoken. He wore her absence like a uniform. He carried it into war councils. He set a place for her at state banquets. He dreamt of the sound of her footsteps in hallways where no one walked. They built her a chamber. They wrote her laws. They celebrated her birthday with fireworks and bells. All for someone who had never drawn a single breath. Why? Because the emperor believed. And when a man with a crown believes, the world bends itself into his dream. This story is not about ghosts. Not in the way you think. This is about the space grief creates when truth becomes too painful to face. It is about how power protects delusion, and how silence, collective, complicit silence, can be louder than any scream. She was never born, and yet, for nearly 2 decades, she ruled an empire. This is the story of the emperor's wife who was never born, and it begins not with her first cry, but with his last breath. If you've made it this far, then perhaps you already know that history isn't always made of facts. Sometimes it's made of silence, of the things no one dared to question, of names that never belonged to anyone and yet somehow ruled over everyone. Here, in Silent Chronicles, we don't tell you what's written in school books. We tell you what was whispered behind palace doors, what was buried under ceremony or hidden in the margins of royal records. We follow the kings who vanished into madness, the queens who were erased, the children who were born only in someone's dreams. If these stories pull at something inside you, a quiet thread, a shadow at the edge of reason, then you belong here with us. Subscribe. Stay. Listen. Because some truths are not loud. Some are not even real. But they change the world all the same. And you're about to hear one of them. The kingdom of Veldenheim was not large. It did not wield the brute force of Prussia, nor the cultural majesty of France. But what it lacked in armies or art, it made up for an order, quiet, meticulous order. Its rulers were traditional, predictable. They married by alliance. They reigned by doctrine. They died, more often than not, without scandal. That all changed in 1763, when a fever swept through the house of Rauenstahl. 2 princes died within the same week. The heir presumptive collapsed in the chapel. His younger brother passed in the nursery, and so the crown fell upon the 3rd son, a boy not groomed for power, but for seclusion. Leopold IV was just 19 shy, reclusive, known more for quoting obscure theology than for hunting or diplomacy. From childhood, he had been described as strange. He spoke of dreams that returned each night like clockwork, of a girl with hazel eyes and a voice he could never quite describe. He said she visited him when he was lonely, that her name was Amelthea, that she lived somewhere outside the world. Most assumed this was harmless fantasy, the invention of a boy raised without siblings, surrounded by tutors, and groomed for nothing. But when Leopold ascended the throne, he did not forget her. He spoke of her constantly. He claimed she guided his judgment. He insisted she was of noble blood, and that, in time, she would return to claim her place by his side. The court laughed behind closed doors. They humored him, thinking grief had softened his grasp on reality. Until the day he made it law. Amelia of Wildenheim shall be named Empress consort. A wedding will be held in her honor. She requires no introduction. She is already known to my soul. Imperial decree, dated September 11, 1767. There were no suitors, no rival nations to offend, no treaties to sign. But the church hesitated. The council grew nervous, and the nobles watched in silence as invitations were sent. For a wedding with no bride, Wildenheim was not ruled by tradition anymore. It was ruled by conviction, by a king who believed, and by a court terrified to tell him the truth. The wedding was held on the 23rd of December. Beneath the cold stone arches of Wildenheim Cathedral, snow fell lightly on the capital that morning, so gently, some called it a blessing. It was not. The emperor wore white and gold, his sash embroidered with a single name, Amelia. There was no bridal procession, no arrival, no carriage, and yet the pews were full. Every noble family in the realm was present. The clergy, stiff with apprehension, stood ready at the altar. The organ began its hymn, and then, in complete silence, the handmaidens walked down the aisle, carrying only a veil, an empty veil. They stopped beside Leopold. He nodded as if to someone beside him, then reached out slowly and lifted the air with both hands. He turned to the bishop. There was a pause. Then, with trembling lips, the bishop performed the rite. Do you, Amelia of Wildenheim, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband? Silence. The emperor whispered, she does. He placed the golden ring onto nothing. He leaned forward and kissed no lips, and the kingdom, out of fear or pity, applauded. The next morning, a proclamation was issued. Her Imperial Majesty, Empress Amelia, has taken residence in the East Wing. She shall not be disturbed. Her chambers were fully staffed. Guards were posted day and night. 3 meals a day were delivered, untouched, always returned. Servants entered the rooms and bowed to no one, but none dared speak of the emptiness. They said the Empress disliked visitors, that her health was delicate, that the light bothered her eyes. A tailor received orders for her gowns, measurements provided by the emperor himself. None were ever worn, but each was paid in full. Soon, Amelia's signature began to appear beside imperial decrees, delicate script, always in the impero. Ours hand, but signed with her name. She had opinions on foreign trade, on cathedral funding, even on military appointments. One general, refusing her recommendation, was removed from service within the week. The palace learned quickly, obey the ghost. Among the staff, there were rules, unspoken, but known by all. Never refer to her as imaginary. Never enter her wing without permission. Never ask the emperor if she is present. Just bow. Always bow. One chambermaid was dismissed after claiming she'd seen no one in the Empress's bed. A royal advisor who raised doubts about her legitimacy was found drowned in the river. An accident, they said. And so, the entire empire participated in a lie. A beautiful, embroidered, gilded lie. Because pretending was safer than telling the king that his wife did not exist. On declared the unborn child the light of Wildenheim, the future of the realm. Plans for a coronation began before the child had a name. The royal astrologer declared the stars favorable. A special nursery was commissioned, with French oak and crystal window panes. All for a child no one had seen, no doctor had touched, no empress had carried. But still, the world prepared. 9 months passed. The emperor's court walked on eggshells. He became more withdrawn, whispering more often to the empty space at his side, pausing as if waiting for replies that only he could hear. One night, he was found pacing alone in the nursery, singing a lullaby to an empty cradle, a cradle that rocked back and forth on its own. Then, one evening in early winter, a dark carriage arrived at the palace. Its curtains were drawn, its wheels silent. Inside was a tiny casket covered in white roses. The emperor emerged in full mourning attire, his eyes bloodshot, his face hollow. He was perfect, he said, too perfect for this world. His name was Alaric. He looked like his mother. No one asked to see the body. No physician signed the death. No record of birth was ever filed. But the funeral was held. A royal procession, a sealed tomb, and a nation draped in black. 3 days of silence. No music. No trade. No laughter. It was treason to question the child's existence. It was blasphemy to doubt the grief of the emperor. Even now, historians debate whether Leopold believed his own story, whether he truly heard the cries of the infant prince at night, or whether he simply needed the rest of the world to believe them, so he wouldn't have to face the truth alone. But truth no longer mattered. What mattered was the weight of ritual, the terror of doubt, and the convenience of obedience. Veldenheim had buried a child who was never born, conceived by a woman who had never existed, and mourned by thousands who never questioned why. And from that day forward, the emperor was no longer alone in his madness. The empire, knowingly or not, had joined him in it. It's tempting, isn't it, to call this madness, to place all the weight of this story on one fragile man. Let him wear the blame. Let him bear the crown of delusion alone. But empires are not ruled by one man. Naturally, an empire has scribes, priests, generals. It has courtiers, tutors, guards at the door, people who knew, people who brought food to empty rooms, who saluted a chamber where no one lived, who cried at a funeral for a child they knew was never there. So why did no one stop it? Because madness in a king is terrifying. But truth in the mouths of the powerless is even more dangerous. To question Amelvia's existence was to question the emperor's judgment. To question the emperor's judgment was to invite exile, or worse. So they played along, one bow at a time. One light passed like incense through the halls of power. And soon, no one could remember where the pretending ended and where belief began. The longer they acted, the more real she became. Power, you see, does not require reality. It requires agreement. And Leopold's empire agreed, not because they believed, but because it was easier than the alternative. Because when a lie is big enough, terrifying enough, and repeated by enough trembling mouths, it becomes truth. And when truth bends, so does history. In the winter of 1791, after 28 years of rule, Leopold IV was found dead in his chamber. The room was locked from within. No signs of struggle. No notes. Only a single object clutched in his hands, a veil, yellowed with age, creased as though it had been held every night for decades. There was no national mourning, no eulogies of greatness, only a quiet, calculated transition. The Regency Council moved swiftly. His belongings were inventoried, his writings reviewed, and quietly altered. The name Amelvia was removed from all official records, her signature erased from decrees, her portraits destroyed, her chamber sealed, then converted into a library. The servants who once brought food to her door were reassigned or dismissed. The priests who blessed her name were reassigned to distant provinces. Within months, she was gone, not dead, just erased. New textbooks were printed that claimed Leopold ruled alone, troubled, perhaps eccentric, but unmarried, without heir, as if she had never been whispered into law, as if an entire empire hadn't once bowed to a shadow, and yet, in the royal crypt beneath Veldenheim Cathedral, among the stone coffins of queens and consorts, there is one that stands apart. It bears no name, no birth date, no death, only a single line etched into the marble: to she who reigned without breath. Visitors pass it by, rarely stopping. Some don't even notice it. Others feel uneasy, but don't know why. They say, on quiet nights, when the wind moves through the corridors just right, you can hear a voice, faint, feminine, humming a lullaby no one remembers teaching her. And perhaps that is how this story should end. Not with a confession, not with a reckoning, but with a silence so complete, so practiced, that the world forgets it was ever a lie. After all, she was never born. But for a time, she ruled.